building was pretty spectacular. It was designed in 1899 by the famous Glasgow architect Charles Rennie Mackintosh. So that's been a huge loss to this part of the city as well as to the art school. Just mind the trees there on the left, ladies. I'm a bit close to the bus at the minute. You might need to sort of... There's one thing about Glasgow being known as the Deer Green Place. They didn't take double-decker buildings and double-decker buses into consideration when they called it that. And just at the corner on the right-hand side is the Glasgow Film Theatre, or the Cosmos Cinema as it was known back in 1939 when it opened. So it's an old traditional Art Deco cinema inside, and locals thought it would never last. It doesn't show mainstream films, it's mainly European and independent films. But we just had the International Film Festival there a few sort of weeks ago. The red carpet was outside with all famous faces going inside. It's a European film festival that's on in it this week. And as we head further down the hill, we'll be at stop number 20, just coming up on the left-hand side. And that's where the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, the National Piping Centre, and the Royalist Theatre, the Theatre Royal. So this is stop number 20. The Royal Conservatoire is just on your left there. That's a performing arts school here in Glasgow. That's where students come to study the arts there. Stop 20. But people are usually quite surprised to discover that the bagpipes are still quite popular, and we get students from all over Europe coming here to Glasgow to study the bagpipes at the National Piping Centre. So as we cross through the lights, right at the top of the road to the left-hand side, you'll see a stone building facing down towards us, triangular shaped roof on it. And that's where the Bagpipe Museum is, and it's where students study the bagpipes. They sit their exams at the Royal Conservatoire. So it's quite nice to go in there and have a look around. If you want a shot at the bagpipes, and you need plenty hot air for that, I can assure you it's harder than it looks. But that's where you can get a shot at the weekend. And just halfway up the street there to the left-hand side, the Cream Building of the Theatre Royal, the oldest theatre in Glasgow. That old theatre opened back in 1879, would you believe? It's not the original one burned out, and that one replaced it, but it's the headquarters for Scottish Ballet inside now. And the theatre on your right hand side coming up, the Cream Building there, that is called the Pavilion Theatre. It opened in 1903, that one, just a young thing. It's all got all the original design inside that old building, and it's been a lot of famous comedians, like old comedians like Charlie Chaplin, to more modern times, people like Billy Connolly have played in there, but it's mostly musical stuff that takes place in there. The newest theatre in Glasgow's in this part of the city as well. We'll see it just shortly, because it's coming up in front of us, just over in the right hand side here, the Cream Building with all the square columns at the back of it. Well, that's the back of the Royal Concert Hall that opened in 1990. So you see the big white trucks outside it on the right hand side there. Royal Scottish National Orchestra made this theatre their headquarters quite a number of years back because they reckon it's got perfect acoustics inside. So they play in here every weekend. And there's actually 2 theatre halls inside it. But you know, the reason for that is the underground runs under here, and there are railway lines under here, so there's lots of vibration and noise from that comes up through the roads. And the architects that designed this theatre, they've got specially made big rubber cushions put into the foundations of it, and that stops all that coming up through, so that's why they say it's got perfect acoustics inside. Our small subway system here in Glasgow is the 3rd oldest in the world. The only 2 that are older are New York and Budapest, but they are much, much bigger. Ours is tiny by comparison, but it dates back to 1896. There's only 2 lines on it. They go for about 6 to 6.5 miles underneath the city. One line goes clockwise, the other goes anti-clockwise. They always say you can't get lost in the Glasgow subway because if you miss your stop, you just stay on and you come back round again. It's quite hard to get lost on it. Although it's not great if you're claustrophobic, it's only 4 feet wide. So it's very, very tiny. Just a baby one. As we head through the lights, we'll be coming over to stop number 21, just here at Buchanan Bus Station, Buchanan Galleries Shopping Centre. So we'll shortly be at stop number 21. The Royal Concert Hall, just here on your right, is a big music festival held in Glasgow every February called Celtic Connections. People come from all over the world to play at that, and that's the central area of it.
The first time I was
Something else on in there this weekend, and I can't remember just off the top of my head what it is. Another big event in there this weekend. The clock with legs there to the left's called Running Out of Time. It's part of a contemporary art trio. So this is stop number 21. Now you've seen the two oldest universities in Glasgow this afternoon, just behind the bus station over on the left. All the light grey buildings at the back there, well that is Caledonian University. That one opened in 1993, so that's very young. So there's about 22,000 students on that campus. It's the only place in Scotland where you can train to be an optician or an optometrist here in Glasgow. But they do have nursing colleges in India. They work with overseas colleges in underprivileged areas where they train nurses in Bangladesh. They've got a few overseas business schools as well, so they do have quite a good reputation. They've actually won awards for being very climate friendly. They collect rainwater in big tanks up in the roof and reuse it through the buildings as well. This was the last part of Glasgow that had the grid system of streets introduced to it. They started back in 1921 knocking a lot of the old buildings down to straighten the streets through the city centre, because the people who were running Glasgow at that time thought that would allow more people to come in and live and work in the centre of Glasgow. So that took right up until the 1960s to get to this part. Thankfully they ran out of money when they got here, so that's why we've still got a lot of the old Victorian architecture and Edwardian architecture right through some of the older streets. If you look back to roughly the 1970s, where Caledonian University is now, just behind that was one of the largest power stations in Glasgow. So this area was sort of dominated by a large concrete tower of the Pinxton Power Station. And that's what powered this part of the city, and also the tram system that ran around here right up until the 1960s. We had trams for about 100 years running around Glasgow from the West End right to here. But when they built the motorway, they pulled all the tram lines up, which sadly means we didn't have them anymore. Now folks, this is the last bus on the route this afternoon. We're just heading back down to stop number 1 in George Square. So I'm afraid that's where Craig and I need to say cheerio to you this afternoon. Yep. So if you could just make sure you've got all your personal belongings with you when you leave the bus, because it'll be going back to the depot from there. But we're not quite there yet. Just in front of us to the right hand side, the big art roof that you can see over there, well that's the oldest railway station that's still in use in Glasgow. That's the roof of Queen Street Station, which was built in 1842, not 1942, 1842. Before that, this was a quarry around here. This was the Crackling House Quarry. So lots of the stone from underneath the streets around here were used in some of the buildings down there in the city centre. But it's fair to say, there's not really much left of the old Queen Street Station. It's just had a big multi-million-pound refurbishment done to it. George Square, just at the bottom of the hill, named after King George III. You might have noticed there was a bit of a parade there earlier. There was some speakers, because it is the social centre of Glasgow. The actual geographical centre is about half a mile from here to the west. But usually if something's happening around the city centre, it's right there in front of you, right in George Square. So hope you've enjoyed your tours with us today, folks. If you're coming back tomorrow, we might see you tomorrow. Thanks to Craig for driving us round. And if you come back tomorrow, bring the sunshine with you. It's much nicer.